Next we're going to make the chair legs. So let's go back to our reference and take a look at that. So they're basically sticks, boxes with a little bit of taper on them, not much. So in keeping with our rule that we want to use as few polygons as possible, then we're going to make a very simple box and apply a simple adjustment to it called a taper modifier. Alright, so I'm going to back out in my perspective view a little bit, Control Alt and middle mouse, tumble around again with Alt and middle mouse. I don't really need the tape measure right now, so I can double click to select both of those and right click and choose Hide Selection. We can always unhide that later from the right click menu or from the display panel. Okay, so we're going to make some simple boxes. And I'll only need to make one of them because then I can mirror it to the other side. Back to my command panel under Create, Box. And I'm going to do this in the perspective view and just create a box any old place, and then we'll move it into position and get it the right size. This is probably the most intuitive way of doing it, and that's kind of how the program was sort of designed. You can build in the top view, but I don't recommend that you build stuff like this in the front view or the left view, because that way its coordinate axes won't be lined up correctly with the world. So always build in the top view or the perspective view. Okay, so I can select it and go to my Modify panel and just say, oh, I only want a length and a width of, well, let's say 2 inches. Press the Tab key. And for the height, we only want 18 inches. Then I'll go to my top view so I can position it more precisely. So Alt-W is the shortcut key. Here we go. Alt-W, and I can go to my top view. Right-click in that view so I don't lose my selection, and drag that over. Zoom in with the middle mouse wheel, and position it roughly so that, I don't know, maybe a 1/4 inch is sticking out or less. Get in closer on the perspective view and examine. So you'll see there is a little bit of overlapping geometry here. The top of the extruded piece and the top of this new box are exactly coincident with one another. That's not really a good thing, but at the end of the day it won't matter because we're going to put a seat cushion over the top of this and no one will ever see that. So once again, this is not real carpentry, this is 3D illusionism. Alright, so going back to our reference once again, note that maybe it's a little bit narrower. It looks like it's not quite 2 inches, so maybe 1.5 inches. And also it needs to have a taper on it. We don't want to add a huge number of segments to this. We don't want a large level of detail. We just need one segment here to accomplish our taper. Okay, so I'll set my length and width to 1.5. 1.5. And height segments to 2. And you can see now that I've got a segment there. Alright, readjust my position. Check it once again in the perspective view. Check it versus my reference and determine, is that good enough? I think it is. Excellent. Next we're going to apply a taper modifier to the chair leg. And that's in a class of modifiers called Parametric Deformers. That means it can change the shape of the object, and it has parameters, simple controls that you can use to perform operations like twist and bend. Okay, so these are actually easier to find from the menu if you go to Modifiers, Parametric Deformers. So here you go, all the modifiers are here categorized by type rather than alphabetically. So it's fun to poke around in here and try to find out what all these things do. Today we're looking first of all at the taper modifier. So I'll click on that with my box selected. And immediately now you'll see I've got an orange box surrounding my object. And that is the taper gizmo. It's showing me the influence that the modifier has over the object. If I'm in the Modify panel and I have the taper modifier highlighted, I can adjust its parameters like the taper amount. So I'm just clicking and holding my mouse and dragging up and down to adjust that. Okay, well, what we want is we want the top to remain the same size and we want the bottom to become smaller. So to accomplish that, what we need to do is to move the gizmo around on the object. So I'll need to open up the Gizmo Sub-object mode. I'll click on the plus sign next to my taper modifier and you'll see Gizmo. I'll highlight that, and now the gizmo is highlighted in yellow rather than in orange. And if I use my move tool to move that around, you can see that it's having an effect on the model. Excellent. So what I want to do in this case is I want to line it up pretty much exactly with that segment. So I might as well go into the left view or the front view, just get in very close and line that up. Then if I change the taper amount, you'll see that it's tapering from that as its center or origin. Okay, so next let's talk about limits, because as I said, we don't want it to affect the top, we only want to affect the bottom. So over here in the modifier parameters you have limits. So when you turn on limit effect, if the limits are set to 0, then the modifier will effectively be turned off. Alright, so the upper limit, we actually want that to be at 0. If we move this up and down, you can see it's having an effect, and we have now part of the gizmo is highlighting here to indicate where the extent of that limit is. Okay, so we can set the upper limit to 0, but the lower limit we can bring down so that we can extend the influence of the modifier down to the bottom of the chair leg. And if I wish, I can get in closer and dial that in more precisely. Okay, good. Now we're almost finished with this. If we go back to our reference, you'll notice that in fact it's a straight line on the outer corner and it's tapering on the other sides. So that gives us an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the finer points of the taper modifier. What I want to do now is move the gizmo so that it's lined up square with this corner here. Okay, so I'm still in Gizmo Sub-object mode. I can select with the move tool in the top view, and as I move this around, you'll see I'm changing the shape. Look in all the viewports and get a sense of what's going on here. As you move it in the top view, look in the left view, the front view, the perspective view, and you'll get a bit of an intuitive sense of this. So I can line that up just there. Let's tumble around in the perspective view, take a closer look, and again compare it to the reference. So I've got a little bit too much taper going on there. So now I'll adjust the amount. And you'll note, if you look in the top view, you'll see a line that indicates basically the footprint of the chair leg. Okay, so if I adjust that, I can kind of figure out where that wants to be. Cool, so we've just done the chair leg. I'm going to exit sub-object mode, back out and take a look. I can unselect the object so I don't have to see its gizmo. And we're moving right along. This is a good point to save another version. So I'll go back up to my application menu and choose Save As. And once again, press the little plus sign and I'll save out a file called chair03.max.